Bonjour. Carefully. Hello, my name is Ainsley DuRose, this is Lola, and welcome back to my channel. I'm a pastry chef living in Paris, and today I'm going to show you how to make my Christmas traditional feast that I always make with my husband, where we make a Beef Wellington, or in French you call it a bœuf en croûte. And then I will show you how to make our dessert, which is a traditional French dessert around Christmas time and for the New Year's. It's a Bûche de Noël, which is a chocolate cake with chestnut cream wrapped in ganache and looks like a log on the fire. So let's start making it. So for this one I'm using a sirloin, which I'm just going to generously salt and pepper all the sides. So to a hot pan with a bit of oil, we're going to sear the meat on all the sides. So you just want to brown it on all sides. You're not trying to cook it, you're just trying to nicely sear all the sides. So we'll take that out and we'll leave it to cool while we do our mushrooms. But you don't need to clean the pan because we'll use that same pan to cook our mushrooms and our shallots. So now we're just going to finely cut our shallots and our mushrooms that we're going to cook down to encase around our beef, with a little bit of garlic as well. So I'll add it back into the pan that we used to sear the meat with a little bit of oil on about medium heat. So you want to cook this down so there's no more moisture. And I added a bit of salt and pepper and some dried herbs like thyme, rosemary. And now we're going to deglaze it with a little bit of, I'm going to use some cider. This is apple cider that we recently just got in Normandy, but you can also use a white wine or a red wine, whatever you want or that you have. Just add just a little bit. So for our next part, you're going to want to take out a bit of film, some plastic film, and we're going to add some prosciutto onto it. Some people use crepes, but I prefer prosciutto. And now we'll just layer the mushrooms. Now we will put our beef on top. I just kind of tuck it all in like a little present almost. And now we'll just leave this to cool before we put our dough on top of it. Otherwise, if we put our dough on top of it while it's still warm, it'll just melt. So we'll leave this to cool for a little bit. So to accompany our beef Wellington, I'm just going to make a pepper sauce. So you want to chop finely some shallots, and then we're going to cook these in a bit or a lot of butter. So we'll just add our shallots to our butter, and we'll cook this on about medium heat. And I'm actually going to save some of these shallots for our green beans that we're going to make later. So now that the shallots have softened, we're going to add all of our peppercorns. Now I'm going to add some of our calvados. If you don't have calvados, you can use cognac as well. We're going to flambe it. Carefully. Once the cognac has reduced by a bit, we're going to add about half of our beef stock. Let it come to a boil. We're just going to add a little bit more. We're going to let it reduce by maybe half. And now that it has reduced, we're going to add our cream. Once it's thickened, we're now going to add just a little bit of butter. So now that our meat has completely cooled, I think I put it in the freezer for about 30 minutes. We're going to carefully unwrap it and make sure it still stays intact. And we'll put it on our baking tray that I've lined with some parchment paper. So now we're going to cover our beef with pastry, and I've already pre-made my puff pastry, which I have a video actually on how I made this. So if you click right here, you can see exactly how I made it and the recipe. So we're only going to need about half to encase it, and then I'm going to use the other half for a bit of decoration. And then we're just going to trim off the excess. And now with the extra dough, I'm going to use this little tool that I have. And you want to make sure you press it down really hard so it cuts all the way through the pastry. Pull it apart. And then I'll do a little bow, because you have to have a little bow. Little ribbons. With this extra dough, you can just put it all out and like one layer, and then wrap it back up, and you can use it for a pie or another pastry, or just sprinkle it with cinnamon or sugar. I mean, you can really do whatever you want, but it's always better to have more pastry than not enough. You can always repurpose things in pastry. You never really waste in pastry. So now we're just going to egg wash it so it gets nice and brown in the oven. Cook it at about 200 degrees Celsius for about, we'll check it 30 minutes. It'll be about 30 to 40 minutes because you want the beef to cook a little, but mainly you're looking for the crust to cook nice and golden. That's what we're looking for. I'm going to make the green beans. It's just a simple green bean where you boil your green beans till they're really nice and tender. And then while they're boiling, I'm going to cook my shallots with a little bit of butter. Just cook it over medium heat till it just softens and you can start to smell it. I'm just going to slice up some radishes just to add on top of the green beans, just to give it some color and a little bit of texture. They're ready. Now I'm going to make the honey butter glazed carrots, and this is the recipe that I used in my Thanksgiving meal. So I have a video, so you can watch the video there to see the full recipe and how I do it. But it's very simple and one of my favorite things to eat. So we're first going to start with the cake for the bûche because it needs to cool completely when you roll it, so when you add the cream it doesn't melt everywhere. So for that you're going to need lots of eggs, and I do like to use a stand mixer because you don't have to have a stand mixer. You can just use good old-fashioned hand whisk in a bowl. It just does take a little bit more time. So today I will be using my stand mixer. So we're first going to start with our eggs. We're just going to separate them into the bowl. Put the egg whites in the bowl for the stand mixer first. And you really want to make sure that you don't get any of the yolk into your egg white, or else it won't whip as well. You also want to make sure that your eggs are completely room temperature, otherwise they won't whip to the volume that you need. So into this bowl of your egg whites, we're going to add 100 grams of regular sugar. And we're just going to whip it on high till it gets stiff peaks. So to test if your egg whites have reached stiff peaks, because you don't want to over whip them, but to test if they are at stiff peaks, little trick is to see if it falls on your head or not. And it doesn't fall on my head, so they're whipped. Just transfer them to the stand mixer bowl that I've removed the egg whites in. You don't have to clean the bowl, it'll be fine. Just add the egg yolks into that one. And we're gonna add 100 grams more of sugar. And then we're gonna add about 30 grams of plain, 30 grams of plain oil. And then same thing, we're just going to whisk it on high till it almost triples in volume. It gets really, really light and fluffy and pale in color. So you'll know when it's done when, again, it's really light and pale, but it also, when you lift it up, it falls like a ribbon into the batter. So now we're going to add half of the whipped egg whites into our egg yolk mixture. And very, very carefully, you're just going to fold them in, because you don't want to, you want to keep as much air from the whipped egg whites as possible. And then once it's mixed in, we'll add our other half. If you can hear sounds of construction, I do apologize. That is just, it's just the sound of Paris. So now we're going to add half of our flour and cocoa powder mixture. And as always, I'll put the recipe down in the description or in the pinned comment so you can see every little step. And you really just want to delicately fold it, but make sure not to over mix it. You don't want to lose any of the air. You just want to mix it just till everything is fully combined. So now we're going to pour it onto our parchment lined tray that I've also sprayed with a bit of baking spray. And my tray is about, it's about 13 by 15 inches. But if you have maybe like a 12 by 17, that can also work. You just want something that's kind of rectangular shape. Just gonna want to smooth it so it's nice and even. And then you want to tap it on the table for 2 or 3 times just to get rid of some of the air bubbles. And we'll bake it at about 180 degrees Celsius or 350 Fahrenheit for about 15 minutes. You want to make sure that when you touch the top of the cake that it springs back and has a little bit of bubbling on top. But you really want to make sure that you don't over bake it, because then if it's too dry, then it'll crack as you roll it up. So you just check after 15 minutes. While our cake is baking in the oven, you're going to want to get a tea towel that's big enough for your cake, and you're going to dust some of the cocoa powder all over it. Because when the cake comes out of the oven, you're going to invert it onto here and then roll it up. So you want to make sure all of the cocoa powder on the tea towel so it doesn't stick. Delicately, but forcefully, we're going to, and then we'll just remove our parchment. When you touch it, you see that it springs back, so you know that it's perfectly done. So very carefully, since it is hot, we're just going to slowly and delicately roll it up. And if your cake does crack, it's not totally the end of the world, because we do cover it with our ganache, but just want to try to make it as crack-free as possible. And you really want to make sure that you roll it tight so that it keeps its shape. And now we want to let this come to completely cool So you can leave it out or you can put it in the fridge while we make our other things for our meal. So for the inside of the cake, the cream that we're going to make, it's just a simple chestnut cream, which we're going to use whole cream, at least 30 to 33% fat, some mascarpone, and then some chestnut cream, which gives it the sweetness, and it's just the best. It's one of my favorite flavors. It's going to mix this on high till it's stiff peaks, but just don't over whip it or else it'll start to curdle. You want to mix it till it's nice and stiff peaks. You'll know it's together when it comes in a nice little clump like this. So now we're ready to fill our cake. Our cake has completely cooled, so we're just going to carefully unwrap it. We're just going to place our cream on top and use our spatula to spread it all around. Now we're going to roll it. And I like to use the towel to help me carefully roll it onto itself. We're going to cut it at an angle so it creates kind of the shape of a tree. Delicately lift it up onto our plate. Our cake on the side. Now we're going to add the ganache on top, so it kind of resembles a little tree bark. You can leave this just as is. I actually think I kind of like it. But if you want a little bit more of a chocolate flavor, then I think the ganache would be the best. And I think on my last video, I show how to make my ganache, so you can click here and you can see the whole process of how it's done. I just like to use the spatula and kind of go back and give it a little bit of texture like a tree bark would have. So now we're just going to decorate with these are candied chestnuts or marron glacé. It's just chestnuts that you cook with sugar for quite a long time. They're really, really good, but they are very decadent. So cover them with a little bit of edible gold leaf. Well, thank you for watching my Christmas feast, and I hope it gives you a little bit of inspiration for what to do for your Christmas or even for your New Year's. We both hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year!